everybody. Today I am going to talk you guys through a list of my top 5 video games of all time, as requested in one of the comments of my other videos. Now, video games are one of the kind of quite important in my life, one of the areas of pop culture that I have a sort of great interest in. And I've been playing video games for as far back as I remember. The first video game console I ever owned was a Commodore 64, which I've now learned was sort of weirdly in the minority in Britain, and a lot of people actually owned the ZX Spectrum, although the Commodore 64 was seen more as the sort of American competitor. I might be totally incorrect about that. Once again, confusing facts for my own opinion. If that is in fact the case, do please let me know. I love nothing more than to be corrected. But I have read that definitely in a few places, and I do know that of my friends growing up, I was only one of 2 people who had one, the Commodore, that is. So who knows, maybe that fact was only applicable to the one particular South Lanarkshire county of Scotland that I grew up in, just outside of Glasgow. Yeah. So anyway, my favourite game on the Commodore, which is not part of the top 5 because it was, looking back, actually pretty shockingly bad, was of course the Ghostbusters movie tie-in game, which in which you were one. I think that the conceit of the plot was that you were 3 new Ghostbusters. You played as 3 different. You played as 3 guys at once, and I think you were 3 sort of new recruits, I believe. And you would have to. I think you started your own franchise, so you had to save up money to build equipment, and you had to buy a car and parts for that car, and then you would get calls from around the city that, oh, we have a ghost. Oh, that's fine, don't worry, we'll come and sort that problem. That's mostly what I remember. I never actually completed that game. I didn't actually know that was this is a strange admission to people who only know video games from the last maybe 3 generations of consoles. But I actually wasn't aware that was a game that could be completed. I thought it was one of these games that you just sort of kept going until either you beat your own high score or became completely devoid of your sanity. The thing I remember most about the Commodore 64, perhaps again wrongfully, is the loading times. Now, the Commodore 64 games came in a few different formats, the most common of which was the humble cassette tape. and you would get it on a cassette tape, and you would put it into literally a cassette recorder that attached to the console computer. I believe it would still be technically called a console. And you set it to load, and then you went off and made yourself a cup of tea, prepared a roast dinner, and done your taxes for the following year, while you were waiting for it to slowly load all of the information from the cassette tape, which was fine, whatever. It was what we had. We didn't complain about it back then, in the way that people in 100 years will wonder why we didn't complain about not having Star Trek style replicators, jetpacks, and teleport machines. That's a silly analogy, because I complain about that on an almost daily basis. But anyway, the Commodore 64, I had that. My grandfather got it for me, and I had a huge library of games for it, mainly because he was one of the most prolific pirators of Commodore 64 software in the west of Scotland, which I later found out. Pirating Commodore 64 games was super easy. You basically just had to have a special chip that went in the back of your computer, and then just copied the games onto a blank blank cassette, from what I remember. So I had a huge collection of Commodore 64 games, most of which were exactly the same, basically profiting from his criminal empire. If it sounds weird that I'm admitting to my grandfather's crimes against copyright, don't worry about it, he's dead now, so I'm sure everything's fine. Plus, I doubt that anyone's going to come after him for that. So after the Commodore 64, the first console that I got was a Sega Master System. The Sega Master System was super cool. It came inbuilt, the early generations, with a game called Alex the Kid, or Alex Kid in Wonderland? Magic Land? Alex Kid in Wonderland? No, that can't be right. Should have done some research on this video. Anyway, Alex Kid in some kind of magic place. The reason I don't really know that title is because I didn't have that game. I got the Sega Master System Mark II, which came inbuilt with Sonic the Hedgehog, which at the time was just a masterstroke of video game technology, until about a year later when my cousin got a Sega Mega Drive and got the original Sonic the Hedgehog game, which showed my Master System version to be far inferior. But that's fine. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on Master System had hang gliders, so if you didn't play that, you missed out. But anyway, on to the actual topic of this video, my top 5 video games. My top 5 video games actually go over a wide range of genres and platforms to an extent. Full disclosure, I actually don't yet own one of the now current generation of consoles. I have a friend who has an Xbox One, and basically all the games that I've wanted to play he has, so I've found myself going round there and borrowing his living room for several hours at a time, which is how I've played Batman Arkham Knight and Assassin's Creed Victory. I do want to get Fallout 4 though, but I think this summer will finally be the summer that I invest in a PlayStation 4. Or maybe an Xbox One, I don't know. I'm going to have a look at the prices when it comes to it. While I'm going through this video, for your tappy pleasure, I'm going to be playing with an Xbox 360 controller and a Nintendo DS, both of which show up spectacularly well against this black background. But that's okay, you won't have to see them, because I'm just going to do this. I'm basically going to play with them the way that you see extras in sitcoms play with video game controllers, which I always used to think was ridiculous until I started doing a course in television production, which made me realise that if you ever actually look at someone playing a video game, it's intensely boring. There's no movement. You hardly ever do anything. But anyway, I digress. Number one. No. Yeah, okay, let's go in ascending order. In no particular order. My number 5 or number 1 pick for my top 5 video games is a relatively recent game. It's about 2.5 years old at this point, which is Grand Theft Auto 5, which is available on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, 4, the Xbox One and the PC. I adore the Grand Theft Auto series. I have spent hundreds upon hundreds of hours in the Grand Theft Auto games, mostly just messing around, to be perfectly honest with you. For example, I was one of the idiots that spent a long time looking for Bigfoot in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, with the only upside being that I now know exactly what stores to go to in that game to find clothes that make you look exactly like a Bigfoot hunter. And yeah, I get addicted to the storylines. I tend to complete these games very quickly. When Grand Theft Auto 4 came out, for example, I actually took a week off work to play it. I had some holidays left over, and I thought, well, I'm not going anywhere, so I might as well take a virtual trip to Liberty City. Grand Theft Auto 5 was no exception. I had recently gone through a mild breakup, and I just sat and ate Asda own brand ramen noodles, drank Iron Brew, and played Grand Theft Auto 5. And in many ways, it was the greatest that my life has ever been. It was one of my highest achievements. Grand Theft Auto 5 introduces a lot of new mechanics to the series, which includes the ability to switch between characters. You play as 3 main characters, each with their own very distinct personalities and special abilities, which is another mechanic that they added. Trevor basically could become sort of psychotically invincible. Michael could become he could shoot really well, like he would go into bullet time. And Franklin, he gained the ability to drive in slow motion, which was actually probably the one that I used the most, because not for nothing, I am a spectacular marksman in the Grand Theft Auto games, so I've never had to use those use the shooting abilities. I say that I'm spectacular. What I mean is I'm really good at the single player. Anyone who's been playing it for more than a week could probably take me on at the multiplayer and leave me in the fetal position in the corner after about 10 minutes. Yeah, I've been playing the Grand Theft Auto games since before I really should have been allowed to. And one of the biggest things I remember is in the Grand Theft Auto 3 PlayStation 2 release, the radio stations were my favourite, and I very rarely listened to the music radio stations. In fact, I tended to listen to the chat radio stations because they were so amazingly well written and performed. The commercials on them in particular are spectacular. From a game that was released in 2003, one of the ones I remember the most is a commercial for, I believe it's for some kind of internet service or for some kind of phone. And there's a lady who gives a review saying, well, this is great, now I can go on the internet in the shower and send an email while I'm driving, which back in 2003 was mere satire, but then obviously no more than 5 years later that was entirely the reality of the world that we lived in. So I wonder what else from the Grand Theft Auto series is going to come true. Is there a Bigfoot? Who knows? Hopefully someone will find him, because he seems a bit lost. So that was the first choice, which was Grand Theft Auto 5. Next choice on my list, going back in time a little bit, is one of the first video games I ever truly became sort of obsessed with, which was Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo, SNES or SNES console, depending on what you called it. I thought I would call it all three, so that no one could possibly correct me on how it's supposed to be pronounced. I personally called it the SNES back when I was a kid, and I call it the SNES now, more out of pretension, I guess, than anything else. Super Mario World was a launch title for the SNES, SNES, and it sort of took everything that had been amazing about the NES Mario games, Super Mario Brothers, all the way to Super Mario Bros. 3, and completely kind of reinvigorated it. Some of the biggest technical changes, and these were huge changes that people kind of might not realise, was what's called the Super FX no, sorry, that's absolutely wrong. It was what was called Mode 7, which was a new technology that they had put in the Super Nintendo that allowed to give the illusion of 3 dimensions. And the way that it worked was you had a sprite on screen, and you could make it appear smaller or bigger, right? So you could make it this size or you could make it that size. What this Mode 7 allowed you to do was to incrementally make it bigger, which makes it look like it was coming towards you. One of the biggest, one of the most memorable uses I think for that was in Turtles in Time, where if you got a foot soldier you could throw him at the screen, and that was actually how you beat Shredder in the third level, the second level, one of the early levels. You had to throw foot soldiers at him, so that was fairly cool. Super Mario things would kind of appear to come out of the background. And then I remember Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Bros. 2 actually improved on that concept, and it allowed things to look as if they were seamlessly growing rather than getting closer. Because I remember that some of the baddies would grow. The evil witch guy would come down and make them magically grow, which was super cool for the time. Super Mario World, I became a bit obsessed with it. It's one of the few games that I've ever bothered to kind of complete. I'm not really a completionist when it comes to games. I reckon I could, if I had to count the number of games that I've actually completed, I wouldn't be able to do it on both hands. But put it this way, I don't even think I would have to take off both shoes. But Super Mario World is one of them. Now, Super Mario World was played a lot in my house growing up, not only by me, but by my brother as well. And if I thought I became obsessed with Super Mario World, he took that to the next level. And he actually has completed it 100%, collecting every coin, I believe maxing out his score, and that gives. I remember the day I came home from school, and he had been off sick, and he came into my bedroom and he said, do you know that if you complete Mario World 100%, all the turtles in the game, I'll say that again because I understand that's a hilarious word to hear a Scottish person say. He said, did you know that all the turtles turn into pumpkins? And I just assumed that this was some crazy fever dream that he was having, but no, apparently not. If you complete Super Mario World 100%, all of the turtles become pumpkins. Who knew? The developers knew, and my brother knew. So there you go. Super Mario World is a huge game, with a lot of secrets. It was the first game that allowed you to ride Yoshi the dinosaur, and if you found certain keys in certain levels, you gained access to a secret stage called Star Road, which were kind of, special levels. But one of the things that was super cool about them was that they each of the levels had a unique Yoshi that had special abilities. So you had a blue Yoshi that whenever he ate an enemy he could fly, and you had a red Yoshi that whenever he ate an enemy he could spit fireballs. I actually can't remember what the other ones did. It's been a while since I've played it. But Super Mario World, that was one of the games that I sort of had to crawl over every single detail of. Like, I had to find the secret key for every level, and I became really good at it, which is odd because I have literally never completed the original Super Mario Brothers game. It's actually on like my to-do list, my genuine to-do list. Contains the entry, at some point in your life complete Super Mario Brothers. So one day I'll get around to it. if I can get it on my DS, I do a lot of, I do several sort of long haul flights, transatlantic flights every now and again. So if I can get it on my DS, I will endeavour to pass the time by completing Super Mario Bros. I think that's really all I've got to say about Super Mario World. It's really good. If you haven't played it, go and play it. Number 3 in my top 5 list of video games is another Nintendo classic, which is one of the Pokemon games. And specifically, although I do love all of the Pokemon games, especially the earlier ones, I don't have as much experience with the newer, later ones from like White onwards. But my favourite one, the one I think that kind of gave the most to the series, is Pokemon Silver and Pokemon Gold by extension. This was the Generation 2 of Pokemon games. This was the first sequel to the first true sequel to Pokemon Red, Green and Blue. You did have Pokemon Yellow in there, but that one was kind of more of a spin-off really than anything else. Once again, Pokemon games fall within the remit of games that I've actually bothered to complete. I find myself becoming very addicted to them. Pokemon Blue, for example, I beat every single trainer in the game. Not just the gym leaders, I mean literally every single trainer. And managed to get all 151 Pokemon. To get Mew, there was always rumours that you could use, you could move the truck near the SSN, or you could go to your mum on your real life birthday, like your mum in the game, and she would give it to you. But even as a 10-year-old, 9-year-old when Pokemon came out, I wasn't falling for that, because at no point did the game ask me to enter my own birthday. Yet. It actually does, I believe, from Pokemon Ruby onwards. I know that one of the games asks you to enter your birthday, and then it gives you a special birthday treat. The again, maybe I've just completely made that up. So anyway, Pokemon Silver. Pokemon Silver introduced a lot to the Pokemon sort of mechanics. One of the most important ones was the day and night cycle. It would ask you to enter the time when you started the game, and in fact, and the game would progress sort of in real time. So when it was 7:15 in the real world, it would be 7:15 in the Pokemon world in the game, and it would be night time. And you could catch like all different Pokemon. Like you could catch Pokemon that would only come out at night. Now it also accounted for daylight savings time, which is how I learned that daylight savings time isn't in the winter; it's in the summer, which made no sense to me as a child, because why would you have to save daylight in the summer? I think daylight savings time is a ridiculous concept, and I hope that we abolish it fairly soon. But this is not a video about that. So, so you could walk about at night and you would find like Hoots, which were Pokemon based on owls, and you would find more insect Pokemon at night. You would find a horrible one that was based on a spider. There was certain events that would only happen at night, and certain events that would only happen on days of the week. I believe there was a lottery show that happened on a Friday, or there was something that happened only on a Friday. And yeah, they increased the roster from 151 to 251. So this was back when Pokemon were at a very manageable level, and it wasn't ridiculous to try to catch all 251 Pokemon. My favourite thing about it though is that all Pokemon games kind of follow the same pattern, right? Where you're a wee boy or a wee girl, and for some reason at the age of 10, you are sent out into the world to become the world's greatest Pokemon trainer in what can only really be described either as slave labour or a strange, it's like a strange world with like adults. There doesn't even be that many other children. So one wonders if, in fact, the Pokemon racket, as it were, is actually a Hunger Games style culling. Maybe they have maybe it's post sort of climate change, and they have a vastly overpopulated planet, and they have to sort of weed out. Maybe it's like Darwinian. They have to weed out the kids that won't be. This is really heavy subject for an ASMR video, but I'm only just realising this. This is crazy, like weird post economy destruction world that Pokemon inhabits. It's really odd. Right, I think once I finish this video, I'm going to go off and write an essay about sort of maybe like Marxism in the Pokemon games or something. So anyway, you're a wee kid and you are tasked to go out into the wilderness to catch wild animals and make them fight against other wild animals. But along the way, you have to beat what are called gym leaders, where you, if you beat the gym leader, he or she will have a certain theme of Pokemon. They'll have electric Pokemon, they'll have water Pokemon, and you have to beat them. And when you beat them, you get a badge. And when you get 8 badges, you are then given permission to fight in the Pokemon League. And if you win that, you become the Pokemon champion, and good for you. And presumably in the horrible undertones of Pokemon, because we only see it from the perspective of a 10-year-old child, that means that you're allowed to live. The cool thing about the Pokemon Silver, though, is that when you beat all 8 gym leaders and the Pokemon League, it's then revealed, and I didn't know this was a total surprise to me, because Pokemon, back in the day, games were really delayed when I'm going on a tangent here, back in the days, games were delayed when they came out in the United Kingdom, so Pokemon Silver was about 6 months late, but I managed to get hold of an American copy, because I saved up all my pocket money for about 3 months, and managed to buy an American copy for about £50, which would be today roughly the equivalent of about $80, right? I think my maths is terrible on that. No, it's about $80, $75 to $80. And I knew nothing really about it other than the sort of little previews I had seen in the Games Master magazine. When you beat all 8 gym leaders, the game doesn't end. You are then put into the world of the original Pokemon games, the Red and Blue games, and sort of just tasked with, well, you've beaten 8 gym leaders, so now go and beat these 8 gym leaders, which, again, maybe too many children won that year, so they were like, oh, well, we have to make this harder, so there you go, kid, now you have to beat 16 gym leaders. The Pokemon is if you've never really played it, it's a very time-consuming game. You have to spend a lot of time training your Pokemon, fighting against other trainers in the world, fighting against wild Pokemon, catching wild Pokemon, having a big bank of Pokemon at your disposal, because some of them have advantages that other ones don't. Like one water Pokemon might know a really powerful move, but another water Pokemon might be like, say, half water, half electricity or something. I don't think that's actually possible. But they would have half and half, so they would have certain advantages that the one with the powerful move didn't. It's a very strategic game, and I revelled in it. My favourite Pokemon is probably Arcanine. Arcanine or Charizard. I like the fire Pokemon. And also Charizard, like I said, he could actually fly as well, because he was a dragon with wings. I recently just bought a Nintendo DS about a year ago, and I've recently got hold of Pokemon Soul Silver, which is a sort of modern update of the Pokemon Silver game. And once again, I'm finding myself hideously addicted to it. I'm only about halfway through the first set of islands, because unfortunately at this point in my life I have things like bills to worry about, and jobs, rather than just not doing my homework, which was my major concern when I was 10. But if you've never played a Pokemon game, Pokemon Silver is the one I would recommend. Maybe not the retro version. It's very, it does seem a bit dated now, and it's quite irritating because your character won't run in it. So that later in the Pokemon games and in the next generation, they introduced that your character could run rather than just walk everywhere. So the gameplay is a bit slow. But they're fantastic games. I absolutely love them, and Pokemon Silver is the one that I recommend. Next game on the list, I was going to describe as relatively new. I suppose it is relatively new compared to something that happened 6,000 years ago. But it actually came out in 2011, which at this point is 5 years ago. So if this game was a kid, it would either be starting school or halfway towards its Pokemon adventure, which is the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Now, Skyrim is just a wonder of a game. Skyrim is an open world game, which means that you are put into a sort of living, breathing world. In this case, it's the continent, I believe, or the country. No, I think it's the continent of Skyrim, which is set in a kind of, I might get bashed for this, but it's a kind of Lord of the Rings-esque universe. You have, orcs and dragons and different creatures and magic and warlocks and thieves and such. But I think the thing that's most magical about Skyrim is the fact that the characters in the game kind of live their own lives. Like, not your character, like you are the silent protagonist. You are there to experience the game more than anything else. But all of the characters, like, I think this is more the case in the preceding one, which was Oblivion. But like, if you went and followed a character, you would see them like go to work, and they would then go to the pub, and then they would go home and they would play with their dog, or they would go to sleep, and then of course you could rob them while they were asleep. When I play games, I tend to always go for the sort of stealthier way of playing, generally. So I'm never really one for swords and gung ho. I tend to be sneaking around with like a bow and arrow and thing. I don't know why, actually. It just seems to be like a weird habit that I have. But I like it. I've gotten really good at it. And Skyrim is a huge, huge open world. The story is that you're like a chosen one in this world. All the like in kind of Game of Thrones, I think it's maybe closer. Game of Thrones-esque. All of the dragons are gone, and then one day a dragon appears, and it turns out that the dragon is sort of forecalling of you're a chosen one who's associated with the dragon. You have the ability to speak the dragon language, which gives you special abilities and powers, and you are kind of there to. Your job is to stop this evil dragon from resurrecting the Age of Dragons and save the planet. But you don't have to do any of that. That's the beauty of this game, is that if you have to do the opening sequence where you find out the story, but then after that, if you want to go around and pick up plant pots and put them on people's heads for 200 hours, the game welcomes that. I kind of, when I play the games, I kind of sit about halfway between those things. I will do like a lot of the story missions, but in between I'll just go for like a mess around. I particularly like trying to see what kind of things I can do almost to break the game. Like I like experimenting with the mechanics and stuff. I remember there's one particular mechanic where you can, if you go into a shop, the shopkeeper will be watching you, so you can't really steal anything. But if you pick up a bucket, you can put the bucket on the guy's head, and then you can steal whatever you want, even though he's still looking at you, but he can't see you. And that's kind of, an almost kind of famous meme by this point. But when I got Oblivion in 2006, I didn't really pay much attention to the internet, really, to be honest. And I discovered that on my own, just messing around. And after that, I became an equipment master, because I literally just stole everything from shops. But there are things you can do, like you can become like one of my favourite things to do in Oblivion. I know I was talking about Skyrim, but Oblivion I kind of adored as well. Was that you could become a vampire, which would give you like special abilities, like the ability to see in the dark, and the ability to see through walls. But the catch was that you could go out during the day, but the longer you went without drinking blood, the more likely it was that sunlight would actually harm you. And the game sort of encourages you a little bit to go and feed on, like there's lots of homeless people around, so it would encourage you to go and drink the blood of homeless people. But I kind of said to myself, no, I'm going to be an honourable vampire, and I'm only going to drink the blood of people that I know are evil. So I basically invented my own story and my own gameplay mechanic, where I was this vampire who was a sort of Robin Hood style vampire, who would go and feed on the blood of evildoers. And I played that for months and months, till eventually I got sick of it because I couldn't go out during the day anymore, and then just found the cure for vampirism, which I remember being really annoyed at because I couldn't see through walls anymore. But Skyrim again gives you a lot of options in that way. Skyrim, you can become a vampire as well. It's not as good as in Oblivion, but it's still fairly cool. But you're kind of just left to invent your own story and sort of left to your own devices to do things and see what works and what happens, and just wander around. One of the cool fun side missions, is the Thieves Guild, where you're tasked with sneaking into places and stealing like important items and stuff. And the Dark Brotherhood, which is sort of the Assassins Guild, where obviously you are tasked with assassinations and stuff. Those storylines are great, great time sink. Again, this is a game that is going to take hundreds of hours of your life, but it's worth it. It's a fantastic game, and I highly recommend it. Now, the last on my list of top 5 video games is a game that probably younger viewers might not have played. I've no doubt they've kind of heard of it because it's pretty famous. But unfortunately, this is another one where I'm not sure of the pronunciation because the word is never said out loud in game. I call it Shenmue, but I've also heard it pronounced Shenmue. So however you want to pronounce it, that's up to you. I say Shenmue. And Shenmue was a Dreamcast game, and in many ways was the original AAA blockbuster game. Like, this was kind of I don't want to say it was like the Jaws of video games, because that's not really true. It wasn't really like the Star Wars either. This was kind of like the James Cameron's Titanic of video games. Like, it had a huge budget. It was something like $47 million budget, which is massive for a video game. At the time, I know that now Grand Theft Auto had like a $200 million budget, but it was huge. And it came on the Sega Dreamcast, which is probably one of my favourite consoles of all time, despite its sort of, not obscurity, because it's well known and it's well regarded, but it wasn't very well developed for. And a lot of people didn't own it because it was quite expensive. And it came out at the kind of end of the PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64 era, and before the PlayStation 2. And as soon as the PlayStation 2 came out, it just destroyed it, right? But the Dreamcast is one of my favourite consoles of all time. It's a fabulous console, and the amount of computing power it could handle after having played a PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64 for 3 years at that point, was just insane. Like, thinking about what you could do, particularly in this game. Shenmue is unique and incredible. Shenmue is kind of a very simple story. You play a guy, Ryo Hayabusa, or Ryu, and he lives in Japan in the mid-80s, and I think it's set in 1986, and it takes place over 3 years, but you witness the death of your father, and the rest of the game over 3 discs is you trying to solve the mystery of who killed your dad, right? Which never actually which does get solved because you see who does it right at the beginning, but it's then him trying to figure out why and trying to get back at the guy, trying to get revenge on the bloke. The most incredible thing about this game, though, isn't the story, it's not the characters, it's the world that you inhabit. They have apparently faithfully recreated like this sort of little town in Japan. Not even just down to like the architecture and the way that the streets worked, etc. Like, they went back and looked at the weather records, and every day in the game, you wake up in the morning, you go out and try to solve your dad's murder, and then you come back at night and go to sleep, and then you wake up the next day and you go out and you try to solve your dad's murder, and then you come back and you go to sleep, right? But this game, they recreated, like, if they knew that it was snowing on Tuesday the 18th of August 1987, the game would snow on that day, right? That's a level of detail that is just was unseen in video games at that point. But the weather was fine, right? What was truly insanely incredible about this game is that you could interact with basically anything in the world that seemed like it would be interactable, right? Interactable. Please tell me in the comments if interactable is in fact a word. But you would like walk into a bar and there would be a dartboard, which in most games is just, you know, like a texture on the wall, like a thing for you to look at to identify this must be a bar because there's a dartboard on the wall. No, in Shenmue you could walk up and you could play darts on that dartboard. There were vending machines kind of around the city, and like in other games, when you see a vending machine, it's just a space that the developer had to fill up, right, to hide something else. In Shenmue, you walked up to it and you bought yourself a Coke. Like I think if I remember right, it was a branded Coke, and you put it in, and then Ryu would stand there and he would drink it, and then he would put it in the recycling bin. Or if you had a payphone, like you would walk in and what you would see is Ryu would pick up the phone, and then you would get a first person view of like his hand, and you could press the buttons and you could find out people's phone numbers and phone them in the game. Now, to be gushing about things like this might sound insane to someone who's totally loved like Grand Theft Auto 5, for example, but back in 1999, 2000, when the game came out, that was unheard of. Like that idea, that kind of realism was just unprecedented. Like no one had ever imagined that would be possible in that game. And so had the game come out and that was the best thing about it, then everyone would have been like, oh yeah, that was a great technological achievement. But luckily it had a really good story and really intuitive controls and fighting controls, and it was actually the game. Hopefully if you're a gamer, you'll know what I'm talking about and you can forgive it for this. And again, if this fact is wrong, please correct me. But I believe it was the game that invented the quick time event, wherein you would start a video and something would happen, like a box would fall from a ceiling or from a roof, and then, like the A button would flash on screen and you had to press A to sort of duck out of the way, and if you didn't, you would fail this little part of the game, which was a video that you were supposed to be watching, which at the time I thought was really awesome. But obviously now, as every single video game has them in it, I actually find it pretty irritating. Shenmue is famous as well because in the final third of the game, part of the story dictates that you, Ryu, have to find a job, right? And the job that you find is forklift driver. Now again, in other games, what you would do is you would go in and you would drive around in a forklift for maybe 3 minutes, and then the game would say, excellent, you've completed this part of the task to be the forklift driver. Not so in Shenmue. In Shenmue, if I remember right, you have to spend something like 2 weeks worth of in-game time as a forklift driver before you find out the reason that you're there, which I believe was to confront a gangster. So you go there every day and you drive a wee forklift and you pick boxes up and you take them over here and then you put wee boxes down, and you just do this over and over and over again. But it's not jarring in the slightest. It doesn't take anything away. In fact, it's actually a pretty cool addition to such a realistic game. Is such a realistic thing to happen, and it's part of the reason why I love it, among other reasons. So yeah, well, I hope that you enjoyed my little video there about my top 5 video games, as well as my insane rambling theory about the horrible world that the Pokemon games take place in. And if you have any requests, please let me know. Please like and subscribe. And most of all, guys, take care, and I will see you again very soon.